welcome to the third and final installment of my look at the book of Job. At the outset, I'd like to respond to a comment, criticism in some cases, I've received from several people, including Whistlin' Phil, who put out one of the original videos to which this series responded, and who posted several video responses to part 2 of the series. A number of people have opined that I've not spent nearly enough time on the role of Satan in the Job story. A text comment from Whistlin' Phil captures the sentiment well. Your argument against God has left Satan out of it. Sure, you mention him, but I find Satan to be a key figure here. God doesn't do all the punishing, but allows Satan to. In one of his video responses, Whistlin' Phil argues that Satan, not God, is at the root of the problem in the Job story. I've spent quite a bit of time on Satan in this series, precisely the amount of time his role in the story demands, I believe. It must be noted that Satan has just a few appearances in the Job text. He shows up only in chapters 1 and 2, speaking with God about Job, and then doing the dreadful things to Job that God permitted him to do. After that, Satan goes away, disappearing from the story, never to be mentioned in the text again. Moreover, as I noted in a text comment to Whistlin' Phil, while it's true that Satan is the immediate cause of the horrible things that happened to Job, his loved ones, and his possessions, much as a bullet shot at a person's head and passing through his brain is the immediate cause of the person's death, the text makes it clear that God is the ultimate cause of what happened to Job. God shot the gun, so to speak. The text confirms this many times, perhaps most clearly and concisely in the 11th verse of chapter 42, the last chapter of the book, where Job is consoled and comforted for all the evil that the Lord had brought upon him. Note that language well. All the evil that the Lord had brought upon him. As ever, the Job story pulls no punches with respect to whom it identifies as being at the root of the problem, namely, God. Okay, moving on. In part 2 of this series, we looked at God's 4-chapter diatribe in which he ignored Job's questions about divine justice in favor of presenting himself with towering bravado and withering sarcasm as an amoral and irresistible force who would not defend himself unless challenged by someone as powerful as he. During the diatribe, God dismisses Job as a mere fault finder who would contend with the Almighty. Job, recognizing whom and what he's up against here, waves the white flag of surrender in the face of God's overwhelming power. Look, I'm of no account. What can I tell you? My hand is on my mouth. I've already spoken once. I will not harp. Why go on? I have nothing to add. God, though, continues to harangue Job for 53 verses after Job's surrender. God seems to be enjoying driving Job into the ground rhetorically. Now, some of my Christian friends will say, well, God doesn't enjoy destroying anyone. I direct their attention to the following. Deuteronomy 28:63. And it shall come about that just as the Lord delighted over you to prosper you and multiply you, so the Lord will delight over you to make you perish and to destroy you. I don't write the book, folks. I'm merely quoting what it's saying. Going back to a question I asked in part 1 of this series, can anyone watching this imagine enjoying the destruction of someone they loved? Such an attitude seems, at the very least, antithetical to love. Does it not? This brings us to chapter 42, the last chapter of the book. The divine diatribe is over. Christians often like to emphasize chapter 42, usually to the exclusion of nearly everything that comes before it. Their enthusiasm for chapter 42 emerges from at least two things. First, the mistaken belief, that Job recants his criticisms of God and repents of having said what he said. And second, God, quote, restores, unquote, what God allowed to be taken from Job at the beginning of the story. Okay, first let's look at the mistaken belief that Job recants his criticisms of God and repents of having articulated them. Why do I say it's a mistaken belief? For three reasons. Number one, I've already mentioned, it's Job 42:11, which identifies God as the one who inflicted, quote, all the evil upon Job, unquote. That one line vindicates Job's criticisms and questions of God and his justice. Job had it right. He wasn't taking anything back. Number two, if further vindication of what Job said is needed, the text has God himself providing it. God twice says that Job, who had been nothing but critical of God, spoke of God correctly. Basically, God tells Job's friends, the ones who defended God and insisted on his justice, God tells them, you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. Job had it right, and his friends had it wrong. This wasn't about justice at all. God directs Job's friends to put together a rather significant animal sacrifice for Job to offer on their behalf in order to stave off God's wrath against the friends for having spoken wrongly of God. Again, I want to emphasize, the friends were the ones who defended God and insisted on God's justice. But Job had it right. God says so. Job wasn't recanting anything here. Number three, I can hear my Christian friends out there saying, but Job 42:6 has Job saying, therefore I retract and I repent in dust and ashes. In his excellent book, God, a Biography, Jack Miles argues for a number of reasons that this rendering of Job's statement is based on a tradition of interpretation that sought to correct the Hebrew text, and in the process changed into repentance, a reply that should be properly heard as Job's ironic response to God's sarcastic and bombastic diatribe. Miles contends that a better, closer reading of the Hebrew than the one ordinarily encounters results in Job 42:1-6 reading as follows. Then Job answered the Lord, I know you can do anything. Nothing can stop you. You ask, who is this ignorant muddler? Well, I said more than I knew. Wonders quite beyond me. You listen and I'll talk, you say. I'll question you and you tell me. Word of you had reached my ears, but now that my eyes have seen you, I shudder with sorrow from mortal clay. Job wasn't recanting and repenting. No, he was concluding that he had spoken the truth about God, beyond what he could have guessed at the time. Job is forced to conclude, sadly, that far more than he knew, he was right about God. Clearly, Job recanted nothing here. Rather, his complaints about God are vindicated even by God himself, who declares that Job had spoken of him correctly. The story ends with God atoning for all the evil he had brought upon Job for no reason by doubling Job's initial fortune, giving him 7 new sons and 3 new and very pretty daughters. However, Job continues to pay a high price. His beloved children and servants who were killed in the beginning of the story are not brought back. Whatever the book of Job is, I've shown what it is not. It is not a testament to God's amazing love in amazingly difficult circumstances.